And remember, where is the head office of WTO? Yes, please. How many nations in WTO? Yes.
In Geneva.
Yes, in Geneva. In international economics relations, particularly international trade relations, the greatest event which happened in setting up of WTO, World Trade Organization. And earlier there was a GATT, General Agreement. Yes. Can you elaborate? GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. This is the long form of GATT. What is the long form of GATT?
General Agreement on Tariff and Trade.
Correct. This was established in 1947, and this GATT continued till 1994, and then in 1995 WTO established. And particularly after Second World War, दुसऱ्या महायुद्धानंतर, दुसरं जे महायुद्ध झालं, Second World War, after that many countries they got down together to work on the ways and means to promote international trade, and the result was the signing of GATT. So these countries they come together and they would like to formulate, and the outcome was, the result was GATT. GATT, it provided reduction in tariff and trade restrictions in phase manner. Trade restriction they did not impose directly and immediate, but gradually, slowly restrictions. It laid down that tasks would be accomplished in different round of trade negotiations. So there were different negotiations. That negotiation is called as round. जसं आपण मराठीत म्हणतो पहिली बैठक, दुसरी बैठक, तिसरी बैठक. So similarly, first round, second round, third round. Likewise, there were 8 rounds, and in this 8 round of multinational trade negotiations were held under GATT. The 8th and the last round of negotiation was launched in Uruguay. So in Uruguay, there was a last round, that is 8th round, and that is why it is known as Uruguay round. The city name is given Uruguay round. The final act was signed in April 94 by the member nation of GATT, and this paved the way for the setting up of WTO. The WTO agreement was signed by 104 member nations. So 104 nations they signed this GATT. On the other hand, WTO is a new international organization set up permanent body and is designed to play the role of watchdog. So WTO's role was as a watchdog. Now we will discuss WTO and India. So what is the connection of WTO and India? So the government of India has made a number of commitments to WTO. Our government, they made number of commitment to the World Trade Organization. The main commitments were tariff line, the first tariff line. As a member of WTO, we go for this tariff line. Second, that is quantitative restrictions. Quantitative restrictions. The first is tariff line, and second one is quantitative restriction. Now, what is this quantitative restriction? It is basically imports maintained on balance of payment. And third one is TRIP, TRIP. TRIP, this was the third commitment, India to WTO. And then the fourth one was TRIM, TRIM, trade related. And the fifth one, GATS, GATS. Under this GATS, that is General Agreement on Trade in Services, India has made commitment in 33 activities. So about 33 activities we committed. So foreign service providers will be allowed to enter these activities. So according to the government of India, the choice of the activities has been guided by the consideration of national benefit. And then sixth one was custom valuation rules. India's legislation on custom valuation rules 1998 has been amended. So far these were the commitments, but how India is benefited due to this WTO. So the first benefit, expansion in trade. India could expand in trade activity. Second one was phasing out of the MFA. MFA, that is multi-fiber arrangement. Short form is MFA. MFA stands for multi-fiber arrangement. So this is basically for clothing. And if you know, Gujarat and Mumbai market are having major portion of this clothing activity. So in Gujarat, particularly Surat, and in Maharashtra, Mumbai, these two markets received a very well I can say, scope to this international trade because of this MFA, multi-fiber arrangement. Another benefit, India could improve prospects for agricultural exports. India expects relates to the improved prospects for agricultural exports as a result of likely increase in the world prices of agriculture producers products due to reduction in domestic subsidies and barriers to tariff. So the agreement, like say TRIM and TRIP, TRIP stand for Trade Related Intellectual Property. TRIP, T for trade, R for related, I for intellectual, P for property. TRIP and TRIM stand for Trade Related Investment Measures. From the examination point of view, we may be asked uh, long form of this. Elaborate TRIM or give the long form of TRIP. So long form of TRIP is Trade Related Intellectual Property Rights. Can you give me any example of intellectual property? What are the intellectual property rights? Anyone? Any example of intellectual property right? Yes, please. Am I reaching you? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So, yes, student, any example of trip? So, examples are patent, copyright, trademark. So, these are some example of intellectual property. Even patent, if any innovation is there in technology, so that innovation is being patented. Not only this technology, but even agricultural also. In India, we have different varieties of rice which is available in India. So then turmeric, haldi. So for turmeric also, India patented for this haldi, and from this turmeric, lot of medicines are being invented. So this copyright, trademark, patent has been made more stringent in the Uruguay round. This has been done to protect the interest of multinational corporations and the developed countries as the agreement on trade. So there was a lot of controversy because this developed country they were having a dominant role over this patent, and because of this dominancy, Let me give the example. You might be aware there was one corporation, Mahabij. Mahabij was the company who was into in supply of seeds which are required for agricultural purpose. Seed. So that seed, in case of say cotton, so the cotton particular hybrid seed was invented by this MNC company, and that time a lot of farmers earlier, our farmers, they used to have their own seed, and that seed was passed on to the next farmer. Even there was also exchange between farmers, exchange of seed. But when this MNC developed this kind of seed, then farmers started purchasing of that seed directly from the MNC. And the lacuna of this seed was, every time if you need that particular seed of cotton, you will have to purchase from this MNC company. No one can have seed from their crop. So that was the lacuna, that was the disadvantage uh, of this cotton seed. And there was a lot of controversy. As I told you earlier, these seeds were and are the property of farmer, and between the farmer they used to exchange. In Marathi, what we call as a wan, बियाणांचा वाण असायचा वाण. Have you heard this word? One. Hello. Have you heard this word? One.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that kind of system tradition we had in India. But when these MNCs entered, because of this agreement, TRIP, trade related intellectual property, हे जेव्हा आलं, that time there was a lot of controversy happen in India. So mostly Indian farmer, they oppose that we should not allow this kind of corporations to have business in our country. But somehow MNC control, because of their dominancy and developed countries dominant role, farmer could not resist this activity, and they did their business like anything, because they convinced government that if you use our seed, there will be huge production. And if you are going for this local seed, that is traditional seed, ज्याला आपण म्हणतो गावरान वाण, so there was less amount of production, but quality wise, which was the best quality wise, our tradition or MNC company? Any guesses? Quality wise? Of course, quality wise, the local one, ज्याला आपण गावरानी म्हणतो, गावरान बियाणा. So that was best one, number one. But the quantity was less. And when this particular system implemented through this WTO, that time population was also lesser. Today we have 140 crore population in India, but that time it was not 140, it was about 100 crore plus, 100 plus 2 crore or 300 2 crore. That was the population when this system implemented in WTO. But as the population increase, then our government and people have also accepted this commitment, that is TRIP. So this is the organization which is at an international level, WTO. Now, there is also another institution, IMF. By the way, have you heard this word IMF? And if you have heard, what is the long form of IMF? Yes, will anybody tell?
Indian Monetary Funds.
International Monetary Fund.
Yes, yes, International Monetary Funds.
Yes, the long form is International Monetary Fund. Now now we will talk about the IMF. In last session we discussed WTO, and today also we end with this WTO. Now we talk about IMF, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank also. So basically the period between First and Second World War, it was marked by extreme dislocation of international trade. युद्ध झाल्यामुळे काय झालं? There was totally disturbance of international trade and even trade strikes. Naturally, तुम्हाला सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे, even recently when there was a war between Ukraine and Russia, you know what happened with Ukraine, and even there was some impact on other countries also. What happened to our country because of this war between Russia and Ukraine? It happened when there was a pandemic. I think after a second wave or during second wave, the war started between Russia and Ukraine. And during that time, most of our Indian students, they were pursuing their medical education in Ukraine. And because of this war, then government asked our Indian student to relocate their place from Ukraine to India, because it was not safe for student because of war. Then our Indian government they made arrangement of flight to transfer Indian student to back to India. Are you aware of this thing? Have you watched this news on TV or have you read in newspaper?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So every time, whenever there is a war, this kind of dislocation happens. So that is why I give this example. But I am talking about this First and Second World War, which happened long back. त्यावेळेला सुद्धा असं झालं. There was an extreme dislocation of international trade and various kinds of discrimination and trade restrictions erected in world currency system. Now, country after country resorted to competitive devaluation as government tried this separately to stimulate aggregate demand and reduce unemployment. The total dislocation of this international monetary system was accompanied by the massive destruction of life and poverty. Life and property, because there was loss of human being and also there was a loss of property. So that followed the outbreak. Now, as a result of World War, most of the economies of Europe were badly shattered. The major economist of 1940, particularly his name is Keynes, economist Keynes, were greatly affected by the economic crisis. Therefore, under the intellectual leadership of Keynes, 44 nations of the world, they came together in 1944. So in the year 1944, 44 different countries, they came together at Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods, Bretton, Bretton Woods. This is the city which is in uh, New Hampshire, where it was agreed to organize the world economy. म्हणजे हे 44 देश या सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर नंतर एकत्र आलेत आणि त्यांनी असं ठरवलं की आपण आता जी काही उद्ध्वस्त झालेली इकॉनॉमी त्यासाठी काहीतरी केलं पाहिजे. So these 44 nations agreed to organize world economy around 3 cornerstone. तर आता ही वर्ल्ड इकॉनॉमी ही कशी स्ट्रॉंग करायची, हाऊ टू मेक दिस इकॉनॉमी स्ट्रॉंग. सो दे these 44 countries, they decided to establish 3 organizations. तर पहिली ऑर्गनायझेशन होती इंटरनॅशनल मॉनिटरी फंड. फर्स्ट वन IMF. Second one IBRD. IBRD, it is also known as World Bank. IBRD is a long form of International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. It is also known as World Bank. The second होती. And third, ITO. ITO stand for International Trade Organization. International Trade Organization. So these 3 organizations were formed to organize this scattered economy. ही सगळी इकॉनॉमी जी स्कॅटर्ड झालेली होती ती ऑर्गनाईज करण्यासाठी हे 3 ऑर्गनायझेशन ची स्थापना करण्यात आली. And which are those 3 organizations? IMF, IBRD and ITO. Of these 3 institutions, while the first 2, म्हणजे पहिल्या ज्या 2 होत्या, IMF and World Bank, were set up, and the third could not get approval by USA. So आता तिसऱ्याचं काय झालं? So in place of ITO, GATT was formed. So these 44 nations who have attended the Bretton Woods Conference signed the Article of Agreement setting up the International Monetary Fund. So initially in 1944, International Monetary Fund was established by these 44 countries and the World Bank as original member. So by the end of 1945, substantially large number of countries had ratified the agreement which was permitting the International Monetary Fund and World Bank to come into existence. And the present membership of both these institutions, आता सध्या present membership, it is 185 countries. So they started with how many nations? This IMF started with how many nations? On the very beginning, how many nations participated? How many nations become member of this IMF? Yes, please. How many nations? 44. सुरुवातीला 44 देश होते, 44 nations, and today there are 185 nations. Now you can see the growth. It is more than 3 times. बरोबर ना? More than 3 times ना? सुरुवातीला फक्त 44 देश होते, आज 185 देश आहेत. सो इट इज मोर दॅन 3 टाइम्स. 3 पटपेक्षा जास्त देश आता याच्यामध्ये आहेत IMF बरोबर. So this is the background of IMF. So when IMF established, in which year? Yes, 1944, and initially 44 nations, and today there are more than 185 nations. Now, what are the objectives of this IMF? So the first objective, to promote International Monetary Corporation through a permanent institution which provide machinery for consultation and collaboration. And because of World War, the country who have badly affected, who are suffered a lot because of this war. So these nations were facing problem of poverty and unemployment. So how to reduce poverty? So that was also the objective of IMF. The first objective, to organize international trade, and the second objective, to reduce the poverty of developing country. Of course, in developed country, there is no question of poverty because already they are developed. But in developing country and underdeveloped country, so they are badly affected because of this war. But even developing country like us, India, had faced several problems because of this world war. We were having problem with health system, even for education, and to improve this health system, International Monetary Fund, they decided to help this kind of country like our country, because we were also developing during 1950 and 1955 period. It was not a good time for us, for India. So that time even there were some health issue. Say diseases like say plague. Have you heard this word plague? Plague. ऐकला का हा शब्द कधी प्लेग?
Yes, sir.
So the plague disease, and then even the other diseases, Indian government was not having sufficient medicine and facility to control this disease. Then World Bank, IMF, they funded our country and tried to control this situation. Even recently, it is not a very old one, you might be aware, IMF, they have been providing huge funding for the polio campaigning, and uh, I think 10 years before, India declared that India is polio free, and then we stopped that campaign, and that was because of the funding from this IMF. But after this 10 year, then a few cases found in India, and again there was a criticism that how India is polio free. There are some cases of polio. Then again IMF decided that there has to be totally eradication of polio. There should be complete eradication of polio. Just hold on. So I was trying to give the example of polio. When polio campaign was funded by IMF, and 10 years before, India declared that India is polio free, but some cases found in India. And then again, IMF decided that there should be eradication of polio in India. Then we started campaigning. Who was the brand ambassador for polio? A very famous Bollywood star, Mahanayak, Mr. Amitabh Bachchan. Who initiated, who agreed for this polio campaign? And what is the cash line of this polio campaign? What is the cash line? Have you seen this advertisement? Polio campaign advertisement. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Have you seen this advertisement? What is the cash line of this ad? Amitabh Bachchan has done this advertisement. What is that? Yes? What is that?
दो दो बूंद जिंदगी के.
Yes, Do Bun Jindagi Ke. So that was the cash line of Amitabh. And this campaign and all this system, what we see that on this particular day, this entire nation, uh, all kids of our country are being given this polio dose, and there are some organizations who are voluntarily doing this job voluntarily without taking any money. Which are those organizations? They are not taking any money, but they are voluntarily supporting. So that kind of management and the strategy planted by this IMF, like Rotary Club, Lions Club, these are some NGO, non-government organization, NGO. So they took initiative for campaigning this polio campaigning. And you know that this is the national program. This national program is funded by IMF. Please do remember this example. When you are writing note of IMF, how IMF is helping developing nation, because that was their objective. So you should give our own example. India once upon a time was suffering from polio, and this polio campaign funding was given by this IMF, and uh, India is observing as a national program, Rashtriya Karyakram, this polio. So this was about the health issue. Then another objective, to facilitate the expansion and balance growth of international trade. Expansion as well as balance growth. Expansion, suppose if the expansion is happening only in a particular country, that should not happen. There should be balanced growth. So they categorize developed country, developing country, and underdeveloped country. So in developed country, there should be balanced growth of international trade, and to contribute thereby to the promotion and maintenance of high level employment and real income, and the development of productive resources of all members. Another objective, to promote exchange stability. Now, exchange stability, again, for a finance student, we have a separate subject, international finance. So there we will be studying in detail, but right now, just remember this is one of the objective, exchange stability. Exchange stability means what? In international market, there is lot of fluctuation in currency, particularly USA dollar and euro, and the third one is pound. So in this three currency, there is a huge volatility. What do you mean volatility? Means movement up and down. So a lot of movement happens. So in order to have proper coordination in regards to this movement, so that is known as to promote exchange stability, to maintain orderly exchange arrangement among members, and to avoid competitive exchange depreciation. So that was the third objective of IMF. Now, how this IMF works, working of IMF. So, working of IMF is, fund agreement requires every member to establish par value of its currency in terms of either gold or US dollar. So, every country will have to make arrangement. Suppose if India wants to print, say, 500 rupees note, so the that much value of gold should India have, then only they will be given permission to print notes. So that agreement requires every member to establish par value of currency in terms of either gold or US dollar. Either you deposit either in terms of gold or US dollar. So currencies were defined in terms of gold and dollar, and exchange rates were determined in almost same as way under the gold standard. Say for example, the parity of the British pound. So the parity of British pound, it will be valued with per gram of gold or per tola of gram. Either you say gram or tola of gold. Since the gold price of the dollar, even if you observe today, the prices of gold and the exchange rate of dollar. So there is a lot of movement ups and down. So each member of the fund was under a statutory obligation to declare a par value in relation to the gold content of the US dollar, and this was decided in 1944. Now most countries fulfill their obligation, and even those who failed to declare par value. So some country they fulfill obligation, some country they could not fulfill the obligation. So member countries can have transaction with the fund only at the official par value. Even the private transaction in any member country should be based on this par value. So this way IMF work at an international level. Then IMF itself, there was one innovation known as SDR. SDR stand for Special Drawing Rights. SDR. SDR stand for Special Drawing Rights. Now what is this? Now this special drawing right. In 1967, the Board of Governors of the IMF at their annual meeting at Rio, they agreed for establishing a new reserve facility to meet the possible increase in the demand for international liquidity. If the growth of more traditional reserve assets, that is gold and foreign exchange, should prove inadequate. So this basically this special drawing right, which was formed in 1967. So it is almost now 58-year old concept. Now, what is the role of IMF to this SDR? So IMF basically drawings from the ordinary facility provided by the IMF and the periodic issue of SDR. This ordinary and special drawing right. Now what do we mean by this special facilities? A number of special facilities are also provided by the IMF to deal with the development. So the special facilities like say supplementary reserve or contingent credit line, contemporary financing facility, emergency assistance. Then in case of natural disaster, maybe earthquake or flood, these are natural disasters. So that kind of assistance were funded by IMF. Then post conflict, sometimes what happens? Initially the war happened, and after war, then the results are realized. During war, generally we don't realize, but after war, then we start realizing the impact of war. त्या वॉरचा जो काही फटका बसतो, that realization starts after maybe 6 months or 1 year. Why don't we realize in the same time? Because of reserve. Some country they maintain reserve, and during emergency the reserves are being utilized. पण रिझर्व किती दिवस पुरणार ना? 4 months, 6 months, maximum 1 year. त्याच्यापेक्षा we don't have that much stock. Suppose even because of war, if there is a shortage of grain or food, so how long we can sustain? Maybe 4 months, maximum 6 months. Now we have sufficient stock of grain. Even 1 year we can easily manage. Total population of Indian population, 140 crore people, can have sufficient food for 1 year, even if there is a serious problem. But during 1960, this was not the situation of India. So that time we were having hardly stock of 2 months or maximum 4 months. But after 4 months, then there was no stock of grain, and there was a very severe drought which happened in India in 1971. 1971 drought was very serious and had a deep impact on the economy. So that time, this kind of funding was useful of this IMF. As I told you, today we'll be covering IMF part only. World Bank may not be covered. World Bank we will cover next session tomorrow. But in case of this IMF special facilities like contemporary financing facility, then supplemental reserve facility, and the contingency credit line. Even there was a facility for low income countries. IMF they set up structural adjustment facility, structural adjustment facility, and this was followed by structural adjustment facility, especially for the low income country which is having very meager income, very low income. So those countries were given funding. So before we end today's session, let's revise again. IMF, IMF at the time of establishment, there were 44 countries who took initiative and established this IMF. But today, if you see, there are 185 countries who are the member of this IMF. And we also discussed the objective of IMF. Objective like say to promote international monetary, second to facilitate expansion and balance growth, and to control health issue, and the next one is to promote exchange stability. So these were four objectives of IMF to promote exchange stability. After World War, particularly, there was a lot of movement in exchange, foreign exchange. I'm talking about foreign exchange. Then we also discuss about the working of IMF. There is a governor body, and below that governor body, there is another committee, and IMF also initiated SDR, special drawing right, the value of SDR as reserve asset essentially depends on the obligation of participants to accept them in the exchange for convertible currency. Although there are certain restrictions on the participant in respect of the use of SDR, in general, they can be automatically used for settlement of international payment. And then we also discuss the assistance from IMF. So this was all about IMF. In next session, we will discuss World Bank. So before we end session, in case if you have any doubt, you may ask. But do remember, these are the international organizations who help not only India but almost several countries to organize their economy. So in international business economy, IMF has played a very vital and important role. And in every time question is asked on IMF. So be prepared. You must know the background of IMF. You should know the objective of IMF. As I told you by background, after the Second World War, 44 countries they came together and they established IMF. And today there are 185 countries who are into IMF. So this was all about IMF. So today we will end session, and then another part we will continue in the next session. Any questions? Any doubt? Yes, please. If no doubt, we'll end the session. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.